Hi there, and welcome to Mental Health Mondays too. This time I'm going to be going into cyclothymia with a little bit more depth. Cyclothymia in general, but pertaining to my cyclothymia because that's all I really have experience of. Cyclothymic disorder is classified as a mood disorder, but a chronic mood disorder. It's kind of a sub-threshold bipolar, but as I said, more chronic, which means that it's more likely to be long-term and more likely to impact your life on a more regular basis. It has hypomanias and depressive episodes, none of which meet the criteria for major hypomanic episodes or major depressive episodes. So they are more consistently appearing, but they are not as high as hypomanias and they are not as low as depressive episodes that you might get if you were bipolar 2, or the manias or depressions you might get if you were bipolar. Now, most of cyclothymic hypomania symptoms are the same as they would be for someone with bipolar or bipolar type 2. They are the pressured speech, the inflated self-worth, the grandiose thoughts, the complete lack of impulse control. So inappropriate behaviours, basically, and dangerous behaviours. Behaviours that could cause harm or bring harm to the person displaying them. I am not on that scale because my cyclothymia is dysphoric. I've had this since I was about 6 or 7. I was an extremely explosive child. I just couldn't keep a lid on all the irritations that would flood into me all the time. It was just not something that I could get a handle on. And as you grow up, this changes and it worsens. Imagine your teenage years with lots of extra irritations. It gets a little bit much. And mine went psychotic. I will go into what happened when I completely lost it when I was 15, but that doesn't just pertain to the cyclothymia. But basically my whole entire life from when I was 6 or 7 years old, I have been battling with this flood of irritation that comes from nowhere. It has no genesis, as it were. To describe dysphoria, imagine the worst day of your life. You've got up in the morning and everything's gone wrong. Literally everything's gone wrong. By the time you get to the afternoon, you are so filled with irritation and aggravation and rage that everything is just making you worse. Even if the day started to go right, you're just feeling cross with everything, and everything is coloured by the anger of the day. Now imagine that with absolutely no triggering incidents. It just comes from nowhere and it colours everything and you can't shift it, and you're getting angry at everything and you know you have no good reason to be angry at everything, but nonetheless you are, and you can't stop. That's what happens when you're having a dysphoric episode for however long it lasts. So it could last half a day or for an hour, or it could be ongoing for weeks. Mine tend to be ongoing for weeks, but I have more of a handle on them and they don't affect me as much. I will still find myself snapping for no damn good reason, and I'm sure all women could say that, especially women with children, but I'll be having a good day, but I'll be battling with my dysphoria and I'll be getting irritated over nothing for no good reason. And that's a completely different thing than being aggravated because you're having a difficult day because all your kids are being demanding and impossible, as they can be. When I was diagnosed in my sort of late 20s, early 30s, at that point I'd been living with it for an awfully long time, and I just had a really low opinion of myself because I thought I was just a spoilt child, really, because you don't have a word for what's wrong with you, a way of explaining it. Now, theoretically speaking, I should be bipolar type 2 because I have had a full hypomanic episode that was almost a mania. But I had that full episode before I was actually diagnosed cyclothymic. I was originally diagnosed mood disorder not otherwise specified, which is a mouthful and a half and doesn't really mean anything much. It's like eating disorder not otherwise specified. It basically says we don't know how to categorise you. And then I had a full hypomanic episode, and that lasted 2 weeks, and it was terrifying, and not while I was in it, but after I was in it. And that got me diagnosed as bipolar type 2, which was not a common diagnosis then. We've only recently in England, I think, become used to diagnosing bipolar 2. But at the time, bipolar type 2 was not common, which is, I think, part of the reason why I was downgraded diagnosis-wise, because cyclothymia in a sense is a downgrade. If you've had a full hypomanic episode, the reason why I think I was downgraded despite that is because dysphoria is more common in cyclothymic disorder, and in one sense it's not a downgrade at all, because cyclothymia is actually the more chronic condition. As I said, it's more impactful in your everyday life. Whilst a person with bipolar or bipolar type 2 might have an episode and end up in hospital, which is a huge impact on your life, it does not happen frequently on the whole. Whereas I deal with my cyclothymia every day, which is not to say, oh poor me, I'm so much worse. It's not. It's just the fact of the matter is that it affects my everyday. As I said in my first video, I was on medication. The first time I took the medication after it started working, it takes about 5-6 weeks to work. It worked for around about 2 weeks, and then the cyclothymia started poking around the edges of it. And so we decided to up my dosage to see if we could contain it. And again, it worked for a few weeks, and then they started poking out again. Knowing that the cyclothymia was poking out again was to experience flashes of irritation for nothing that I couldn't contain, flashes of depression for nothing that I couldn't contain, and then you have to up the medication again to restrain those. In the end, I was on the full dose of my lefepramine and my Depakote, and just decided that's it, I've had enough, because all the side effects were just so bad, and the cyclothymia was starting to poke out the edges again, and I'm like, this is not, I can't go any higher, this is the highest dose I can go on, there's not much they can do now. My psychiatrist was very, very clear in that he didn't want to try me on lithium, because I'd had a bad reaction to certain medication. I don't respond well to them. So I just came off cold turkey, stopped taking them, and asked for talking therapy instead, because I knew I needed something, because, you know, mum of 3 children, I needed something to get myself together. And I ended up having psychotherapy, which helped a lot with the daily process of just living. The more we talked about it, the more sort of at ease I felt with my daily life, because I felt trapped a lot of the time. I do. Part of my cyclothymia is feeling trapped, because the depression side of me doesn't want to go out. I'll talk about that in the vlog about depression, but the depression side of me doesn't ever want to leave the house. She'd happily be a hermit up in the mountains and never speak to anyone, never see anyone, never do anything. So yeah, I do have the cyclothymic depressions. They are the smaller ones. Hell, they don't feel any less bad than the big ones. I can tell you. I can tell you for a fact, because I suffer from major depressive disorder. I have had full-on, deep, long-term depressions. I can assure you that depression feels the same. Whether you're in it for 5 minutes or whether you're in it for 5 months non-stop, it feels the same. It feels like it's never going to end. It's an immersion. You are submerged in the darkness inside your head, and you can't breathe in there. This never changes. It never changes. So never ever dismiss somebody else's depression just because it didn't last as long as yours or didn't seem to be as deep. It feels the same. The further I get into recovery, the more I realise that I'm not supposed to be a really insular sort of person. And that's very frustrating. Anyway, my hypomanias, as I've said before, I have the dysphorias, which are the irritations. They are under my control now. That doesn't mean to say that they don't affect my life still. They do. It's just that I know they're coming. I know the signs. But they can still take me by surprise. And then it's harder to get a grip when you're hijacked. But I manage. Not always easy. And it's not something that will ever go away. When I speak of recovery from my cyclothymia, I speak of getting it under control. This will always be with me. There is no cure for cyclothymia, as far as I know. It is one of those conditions that's considered to be lifelong. And it is also one of those conditions that can get worse. So whilst I'm in recovery at the moment, I've got this thing hanging over my head that at any point in the future my cyclothymia could decide to just explode out of my control and become something worse, especially when I consider that I've already had a proper full hypomanic episode. That's quite frightening. But I try not to think about it. Now on to how cyclothymia has affected my life. I'll be fairly brief. Everybody has dreams, everybody has things they want to do. I do. I have dreams, I have things I want to do, but for many, many years I just could not. If you have no capacity to cope with things, if dealing with people is impossible and dealing with social situations is impossible, if trying to get yourself together just to make a cup of tea feels like a gargantuan task, how on earth are you going to go out into the world and do all the stuff that people expect you to do? And yet it's frowned upon to be mentally ill, like it's some kind of an excuse for being lazy. Oh my god, I wish this was laziness. I wish it was laziness. I wish it was as simple as that. I wish it weren't the kind of prison it is. I remember the first time I read Oscar Wilde's A Ballad of Reading Gaol. I never saw a man who looked with such a wistful eye upon that little tent of blue that prisoners call the sky. I cried for about 5 hours. And it's just, I'm wanting to be honest in these videos, but that little tent of blue that prisoners call the sky, that was my fucking window. That's all I had of sky for years. That's all I could cope with, and you have this person trapped inside of you that wants to go out and wants to live and wants to do stuff. But the prison holds you in. The prison is your head. The prison is your head. Those are my iron bars. And it's so difficult to explain to people how absolute that is. And when it comes to recovery, how incrementally the bars thin. They do not easily disappear. They are your comfort zone. And that's a horrendous, horrendous reality, that your prison is your comfort zone and that it's hard to step out of it. I hope I've made sense, and I hope that some of that has been helpful. I hope you understand a little bit more of cyclothymia, and I hope you understand what it's felt like for me to live with it and to continue to live with it. And you understand that it's nowhere near easy. It's not something you can just step away from. And some days my little tent of blue is still a reality, and I'm hoping that will change completely. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to put them in the comments. I will answer them. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.